So, welcome everyone to this Parenting Stages. That's the class or the session that you're in. My name is Mindy Dye, and this is my husband Rod Dye. And we are going to pray, and then we'll give you a little background on us. Okay?
Yep. Lord, thank you for tonight. Thank you for letting us gather in the church and just learn life's practical steps, and just be with all the conversation and guide all the conversation, and just let's have a great time of fellowship. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Okay, so I'll give you a little family background. We have 4 kids, and we've been married for 29 years.
Wow. Happy for 27. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a funny story with that.
That is a funny story all in and of itself, and we will not go into that.
Oh, that's too bad.
Nevertheless, we our oldest, Kaylee, is almost 24, and she graduated from college in 2017, and she is now, she graduated with a graphic design degree from SBU, and now she's a nanny. Bonus. Carter just turned 22, and he got married on Saturday, and he's in college. He'll be a senior at Mid-American Nazarene this next year. Callan is 19 and a half. He's going to start college at SBU in the fall.
Should you be pointing to the lovely little
Oh, yeah.
family?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is my favorite picture of our kids. And this is Kaylee and Carter, the one just got married. And then Callan, the one that starts college. And then this is Caleb. He is 18, and he will be a senior in high school this year. We have homeschooled our kids from the beginning to the end so far. We have 1 more year. We are so excited. I am so excited. Yeah. Yes. And just to dispel any thoughts that we might be model parents, because that's why we're up here, not true. And of course you know that. But I'll just give you a little story that kind of tells you that that's not the case. I left our youngest child at home alone when he was 4 accidentally. Thankfully, we were just a couple blocks away at a baseball game, but it was traumatic for me and him. And Rod
You want me to spell all my dirty laundry?
has been kicked out of a t-ball game.
That I was coaching, by the way.
Yeah, that he was a coach of. So there's that. Yeah. So, and as we've been talking about this this session, we tried to think about like just little things that we could share about our lives and so hopefully we can interject those here and there. We did definitely have different parenting styles. We both came from broken homes, and so we kind of thought these are the things we don't want to do. I mean, you get that a lot. And then we had different styles in the beginning. I was definitely, and still probably am, that parent that's like the helicopter parent, whatever that means. I'm like hovering over my children all the time, and I always have been. He's definitely not like that. And I remember one specific day we lived in New Hampshire, and he didn't like to come home. I mean, I never did the thing where you say to your kids, wait till your father comes home. I mean, I just did not do that because I didn't feel like it was fair to him or them, really. And he came home one day, and I don't remember even the conversation, but I just remember that I was like, but you have to do something about this thing with this child. And he was walking out the back door to the barn. We had like this barn back there, and he was like yelling the whole way, I am the good time party fun dad. He did not want to be like the disciplinarian. So it was.
She's walking out the door.
Oh yeah. Oh
yeah.
yes.
That's great.
Yes.
That's perfect.
Yeah. So it was just kind of funny. So we've had lots of different styles but we've ended up pretty well on the same page.
That was like 20 years ago.
It was. But we've ended up on the same page, and we kind of, compliment each other a lot because he's definitely, the way that he's different than I am, it complements kind of, and so we've made it work. Let's see. I wanted to say about our kids, that we haven't had an experience with our kids where they've chosen not to honor us. So if you have kids that have chosen not to honor you in some way, we don't have that experience, so we can't answer questions about that or how that feels or what that looks like. So far, and our kids are still fairly young as far as, they're not like, but they're starting to make their own choices. And that's not to say that, and what I mean by that is, I don't mean that they haven't made choices that we don't agree with, because they certainly have. They've made choices that we aren't happy with, or that, we would have not chosen that path for them.
Well, we instructed them to do one way and they went the other.
Yep. But in the things that matter to us, they've been honoring. Not that those things don't matter, and they do. It's just they get to make choices now, and I try to remember that when we were their ages, we got to make our own choices, and maybe made choices that our parents weren't very happy with, from time to time.
I think you might want to preface it that we're in the friendship years now.
Yeah, we are. For our stage, if you look at the little
during the
handout, we kind of
coaching
gave you
years.
these stages that we'd like to talk about, and we are in the friendship years for all of our kids now. Obviously, with them all being 18 and older. So, in that aspect, that that's where we're at. I have said that I have enjoyed every stage that my kids were in. I really have liked all the stages. We didn't have terrible teenagers, and we just didn't. Now, we did have some terrible 2s and 3s. But we didn't have, our kids, we've enjoyed every stage so far. So that's been
Now
good.
the 8 years of diapers in a row with that.
Yeah, a long time in diapers we did. Yeah. So, we also never set family goals. We watch these videos that we're going to tell you about a little bit, and he talks about how they before they had kids, right as they were having kids, they set these family goals and these parenting objectives, and I'm thinking, well, we didn't do any of that. It was like trial and error, and you make mistakes and you learn with the next one, or even with that one, what works and what doesn't work, and your kids are all different and all of that. So in looking back, we can say, as we, like I said, watched these videos, they were very short videos, and we put the links for you on this sheet. They're very short. One is 12 minutes long, and the other one was 11 minutes and something. And so they're really short, and honestly, the second one cuts off right in the middle of a sentence, so I'm pretty sure it's not all there. But it was really good information. And as we looked back and thought about the principles that they talked about, we realized that we were pretty much did those things or thought of those things. And so the verse that we never said, oh, this is our family verse or whatever. But looking back, I said, Matthew 22:37-40 says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments depend all the law and the prophets." And Rod had kind of mentioned this verse to us as we were looking at, what we were going to talk about. And I think that was our goal. Looking back, that's not the goal that we set at the beginning, but that was our goal, that we wanted our kids to love the Lord with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength, and we wanted them to love their neighbor as their self. Do our kids
And
always?
love each other, yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure, and love each other. Anyway, so the video, I already mentioned the videos that we did watch. They're really good, and like I said, they're really short. And we didn't know anything about them, and Nate sent them to us, and they were a really good resource for us. So let's talk about these stages of parenting. And I can give you just little snippets about each one, and then we'll try at the end to have some discussion time. So the discipline years, ages 0 to 5, that's when you're kind of the commander. You're the one that's telling them what to do, how to do it, all of those things. And you guys know with the kids that you've had that age kind of how that goes. But those are their really formative discipline years. And the guy on the video made the point that if you don't discipline in the discipline years, you will have to discipline in the next stage. And if you don't train in the training years, you'll have to train in the next stage. And it gets really, really hard. So you don't want to do that. You want to definitely use those 0 to 5 years to really set down, your guidelines and what you expect, and be consistent. He brought up what we realize now is things that we were really important to us. They called them the 3 Ds: disobedience, dishonesty, and disrespect. Those are the 3 things that, in looking back, we thought those are the things that we really wanted to make sure that our kids were well versed in. We wanted them to know that it was wrong to be disobedient and dishonest and disrespectful. And so, I think that you can say, if you...
Those were things that they, in your discipline years, those are immediate punishment.
Yeah. There should be consequences for those. Yeah. Significant consequences for those things. And at that time in their lives, you're going to teach consequences that are related to their behavior, and you're going to do that at that time because at that time the stakes are low. They're 0 to 5 years old. The stakes are low. It's not something probably that it's going to be life-threatening necessarily to them. Obviously you want to make sure you teach your kids that the stove is hot, not to run across the street in traffic. Those things. So
my dad's in the room, so we had that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Don't touch that skillet.
Right, yeah. So, the stakes are low at that point. So, make sure that you get those things in and use those words. Even if they're young and they maybe don't understand those words, the video suggested that you use those words anyway because they will come to relate those words to those things, dishonesty, disobedience, disrespect. So I would use those words when they're young so they kind of know that that's what they're doing. So then in the training years, you're their coach, right? You're teaching them things. You're explaining while you're training. Okay, so if you're going to explain, I did a lot of that. He was more of do what I say now. And I was more into teaching them or telling them the why. I wanted them to learn, why they were doing the wrong thing or why they were doing the right thing. Because they always tell you to catch your kids doing something good too. So that's really, really important I think for the kids especially, is to try to find them doing something. So I praised our kids for doing things that was the right thing to do. So try to do that as well. But you're teaching them the why behind the what is important during those years, and you're still disciplining. Obviously, you're not. That doesn't go away, but you're going to do it a little differently. And there's going to be what they call teachable moments. And a tip for the teachable moments for us was you can't have a teachable moment when they're mad or angry or upset or screaming, and you're really upset. So that's not a good time for a teachable moment. A teachable moment would be a time where it's non-conflict and you can look back and say, how could we have done this differently? At that age, in the 0 to 5, we took a parenting class, and I was racking my brain today trying to think of the name of the book study. And it was really a rigorous study that we did with some families in our friend group. And I can't think of the name of it, and I wish I could. But it taught you different skills to help your kids to learn to be respectful and stuff. And several things we took, I want to preface it by saying not everything we agreed with, because it was kind of a legalistic study in my opinion when looking back on it. But we taught our kids how to put their hand on our arm if we were talking to someone else so that they didn't interrupt. So if you teach your kids to put
you didn't want mom.
You don't want to, that's rude. And that's disrespectful to the person that's talking to you. So we tried to have them put their hand on our arm and to let them know that we recognize that their hand was on our arm and they wanted something. We put our hand over their hand. So if you put your hand over their hand, they're like, oh, she realizes that I'm here, and then she'll let me speak when it's my turn. So that was one takeaway that we had from that class. The other one, and we lived in the South at this time, so everyone there said yes ma'am and no ma'am. yes sir, no sir. So at that time, we had to teach our kids to do that because it was disrespectful in that culture not to do that. And then when we would come back here, my mom would say, they shouldn't say that, that's rude. She thought that it was disrespectful to her if they called her ma'am, because in her mind, yes ma'am, was rude.
Well, they did have a little southern accent.
But that we liked that they said that because we felt like that was something that was more respectful when you're addressing an adult.
Yeah.
We also had them call adults by their last name. Now in the South, again, when we were there, it was more appropriate to say Mr. or Mrs. their first name, Mr. Rod or Miss Mindy. So they did that a lot too. But we did, when we moved back here, I was pretty adamant that they use last names for adults, that they, just to show respect to them. So, so in those training years, still disciplining, have those teachable moments. Then you move to the adolescent years, and you're kind of their counselor. So hopefully you've disciplined when you should have, and you've trained when you should have. And during these adolescent years, you move more into connecting with them. You want to be connecting with them instead of correcting them. Okay? And again, all these little phrases that you're hearing me say, we got off the video. So they're none of mine. But you want to be connecting instead of correcting as much. Of course, you're still going to correct them. But and then at that stage, you also want to allow more natural consequences if possible. You're not going to set the consequences as much, maybe some natural consequences, because when they get out of that stage at 18, there's going to be a lot of natural consequences for the decisions that they make, whether good consequences or bad. So you want to definitely allow that to happen. And then at that stage,
An example of a natural consequence?
What's what?
An example of a natural consequence.
Well, I mean, in its most simplistic way, it would be that they burn their hand when they touch the stove. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm trying to think of one that would be good for that age, which would be 12 to 18. So if they don't do their homework, they get
They want to stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday night,
Yeah.
and don't want to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning to go to Sunday school.
so then they're tired.
Yeah.
So that's a natural consequence that they're going to have.
After you've told them 3 weeks in a row, you're not doing that, and they keep hounding you, then you get them up at 6 o'clock in the morning on Sunday.
He never did
Might
that,
be a little
but
bit
he did
different.
always threaten to do it. He did not do that. He didn't threaten to them to do it. He talked to me about it. You need to tell them to go to bed. You need to wake them up at 6. I'm like, wait a minute. No, you're not going to do it.
I don't want to get up at 6.
Yeah, exactly. So this time should be also a time where you start listening to your kids more. I listened to my kids a lot. My mom never listened to what I had to say. And I think that was the culture for that maybe generation possibly, but I never had a voice. And I did not like that I didn't have a voice. And so when my kids got to the time that they got to have an opinion, I did listen to it at obviously there's appropriate times for that, and there's not times that are best for that. But I did try to listen to them a lot more than my mom listened to me, and let them have an opinion, even to the point of, like, if I knew if they did something wrong, letting them help with the consequence, whatever the consequence might be, that sort of thing. So we really did try to listen to our kids. I did more than he did. Again, he was just more this is what I said to do, so do it. It's okay, and it's at times that's what's appropriate.
Yeah.
You can't always take their input. There are times where this is just what it has to be, and if they have, Kaylee was notorious for saying, but what she would say, but what about this? And I'm just like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. And he's like, no, this is what we told you to do. So there's a balance there, obviously. But you want to be a receiver of information. When that might be the time where they might start talking to you about things that you might be a little shocked about. Whether, like, if your kids, when they come home from school and maybe something's happened there. And there was a book that the video referenced called For Parents Only, and I put that down there at the bottom, that the woman that wrote the book said, don't freak out over the good things and get this high pitch, oh, we're so excited, yay. because they're going to be like, Mom, guess I shouldn't have told her that. And then don't freak out over the not so good things or the things that they might tell you that you might be like, oh, I wish they hadn't done that, But listen a lot and get them to talk because you want them to talk. And then at that point, not everything's a teachable moment. Okay? You can't always have, you should have already done that in the training years, obviously. And so, there are still going to be teachable moments. And I'll give you an example of one that happened with Caleb. It was rough. But we were in the middle of a gymnasium. He was playing a basketball game. He got mad at his coach because his coach wasn't playing him as many minutes as what he thought he should be playing. He's probably 15 or 16 years old, maybe?
14.
Okay. And his friend, who's on the team too, also got mad at the coach. So they were talking about this amongst themselves, I'm sure, on the bench. And the friend the coach pulled him out, and the friend takes his shoes off. He was mad, so he took his shoes off in the middle of the game and walked away from the games. And Caleb decides that that's the thing to do and was the follower, and he did the same thing. And I was like, ooh, and I'm sitting in the stands, all these parents, and I'm thinking, no, this is not the right thing to do. And so I got up off the bench, and I embarrassed him. And I still to this day don't know if it was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, but he never did it again, so maybe, I don't know. But I went over and I told him in no uncertain terms that he was to get his shoes back on and that he was to sit there on that bench respectfully no matter what his playing time was. And I get back over to sit down, and he's over there mad, of course, and I had other parents that were like, good job, Mom. And I thought, I don't know still if it was the right thing or the wrong thing to do, but I knew at that moment that I had to make an impact on him somehow. I don't generally, I do not embarrass my kids in public. That is one thing. Well, but you do it in a funny way. When you're disciplining, if my kids did the wrong thing when they were in public, I did not embarrass them. I did not demoralize them. I always waited till later. And there were people in my life, close people to me, that I know thought that I didn't discipline my kids well because they would not see me do that. But I just thought that there's just no reason for them to just be totally embarrassed in front of other people because it can breed hatred in their heart for you too. And so when you let it go at that moment, and they know, they can see my eyes. Your kids know your looks. And so a look sometimes is all it takes, and they realize, we'll be talking about that when we get home or on the way home. But in private, I did it much more in private, and maybe in front of their siblings sometimes, but pretty much we would have private conversations about things that were,
It's a rarity to catch your kid with their hand in the cookie jar. I actually got to do that with Carter when he was probably, 6 or 7. He didn't know I was in the living room, and he creeped in, and he was supposed to be in bed, and he got into the pantry and was opening up some Oreo cookies, and I come around the corner, and all I do was say his name, and he looked at me, dropped the cookies, cried, and ran. But it made an impact on him.
And he's a rule follower kid.
Yeah,
he's a rule follower kid. Yeah. So to get caught like that, I think was impactful to him. Yeah. And even when he started driving, he got his first ticket. And he doesn't speed. Generally speaking, he is not a speeder because he was embarrassed that he had got that ticket, and he is a rule follower kid. And we have some kids that are rule followers and some aren't. But he definitely was, and so that made just those little things make an impact on your kids, I think. Okay, so let's see. So the friendship years were in that, and there's not a lot of information on those videos about that. But for me, it's just continuing to listen to them and not freaking out still. They're getting to the age where they get to make their own decisions, so they might want to freak out sometimes. And I am of the notion, and I, again, don't know if this is right or wrong, but I've told my kids this, that I'm your mom. I've earned the right to give you advice or to say things that I feel like need to be said, even when they're married. and I've told them, and they don't have to take that advice, but I feel like that sometimes if I don't say it and something happens that would be, something bad would happen, then I would feel bad that I didn't say it when I thought it. So I just told them that you don't have to take my advice, but I feel like that I've earned the right for you to listen to me, even as an adult. And then you have to have the balance of when it's right time to speak and when it's not. Because sometimes, even though you think it's not the right time. So, and we're just transitioning into that where they're moving out, and so then you have to figure out what that balance is. And that, yeah, so there's that. Let's see.
You want to talk to them about the
Yeah,
main
so
points?
yeah, so this, we're in the middle of the page, it says the ultimate goal, and this has been, and I didn't word it this way, but this has been our ultimate goal. And what I would have said is, I don't want to alienate my children, no matter their age. So I want them to be able to feel like they can talk to me, although they know that I'm not their best friend. I mean, especially in those, discipline training, adolescent years, where you're the commander and the coach and the counselor. They know I'm not their best friend. I've said that to them. I am not your friend, and I don't care if you like me in this situation or not. But when we get to the friendship years, you do want that relationship and that friendship and that time that you get to spend with them to be special. And so the ultimate goal in my mind is to have children who want to be with you and to be with each other, even when they don't have to. So there's that. And I'm going to go over we're a quarter till, so I want to go over these last couple of things, and then I want to give us a time to visit or to ask questions if you have questions. Not that we can answer your questions, because I have yeah. But the other video, the second video, talked about this: emphasize honor over obedience.
So Sheila got the
where
Google.
you tie the rules to relationships.
So Sheila got the Google.
So when you tie the rules to relationships, what they say is that you don't have to have an environment where, you would have an environment where there's minimal rules. So if you tie the rules to relationships, then the environment that you create in that is that there's minimal rules. So what comes out of that is the why behind the what is actually a person. So that kind of relates to that training years where you're teaching them the why behind the what. And so in that, when you don't have honor, so honor over obedience, then when you don't have honor, you have to have rules for every eventuality. Like, when you talk about to your kids about don't do this, and then they say, well, you didn't tell me I couldn't do it at this time, or you didn't tell me I had to do this so you would have to have.
Never do that, would they?
So you would just have to have rules for every eventuality because they're not honoring. You haven't captured their heart at that point. They're only. Rod said something good today.
You draw a line in the sand, and those are the kids who are going to come right up next to it. They might stick their foot over it, but not really touch it. Versus somebody who honors and respects you is like, why do I need to go near the line? My mom doesn't, or my mom and dad don't, like that, so I'm not even going to get close.
Which is why we say that our kids are honoring to us right now. You desire a relationship, not a rule follower. You don't want somebody, Rod said this today, you want a relationship with your kids. You don't want them to be just a rule follower. You want them to do it because it's the right thing to do, not because you said so.
Right.
And so
God gave us 10 commandments as rules, and we can't follow them all,
Yeah.
But we can have a relationship, with Jesus, and that's the most important
And
part.
be honoring.
It's the same aspect with your kids.
Yeah. So the two things that came out of that, that honor over obedience, is honor your mother, and they gave some really good examples of what they do in their household to honor the mother. We didn't do these things. We didn't think of them, but they said have the men stand, whatever boys or men you have in your household, they stand at their chairs when you're sitting down to dinner or to a meal, and let the women sit first. Girls, the daughters or the mom, they let them sit first, and that shows the boys how to honor women, and it shows the girls how to recognize honor or dishonor in a man. So it was a good example. And then I'm sure there's many other, like opening doors. I mean, just the things that you would think that would be chivalrous, I would say would be honoring to a mother. And he even mentioned, the man in the video, Andy Stanley, even mentioned that he would over discipline if they dishonored their mother. So the kids knew if they dishonored their mother, he said, you can dishonor me, but do not dishonor your mother, and I will over discipline you if you dishonor your mom. And he said what comes out of that is they honored him as well. When he honored their mom and he made them honor their mom, then they honored him too. So we didn't do those.
What is the respect level too?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And then the other one was, the other big rule was thou shalt not lie. And lying breaks relationships. And so that is huge. You know, when they lie, then that breaks your relationship with them. It breaks your trust, it breaks your bond. And so you want to do everything you can to help them. And what we did in that scenario is I generally didn't put my kids in a position that they would want to lie or that they would feel like they had to lie. So when I knew something about them, I didn't say to them, now, what did you do? As long as I knew it, we would just talk about what it was. I didn't put them in the position to say, no, I didn't do that. Because why would you, I mean, that's really setting them up for failure. And you don't want to do that. I mean, there's times that you've got to let them fail. That's not what I mean. But I don't think we just tried not to say to them something that whether it was good or bad.
We knew the truth.
Yes.
You know,
we didn't question them about
in,
that.
Yeah.
And the guy in the video recommended that if you knew the truth and you're asking them questions about the truth, that you would say to them, now, I'm going to ask you this question, and you might be tempted to lie, but you know that lying is our gravest, rule that we have is, I mean, that's what he said that if you even ask their kids now, what is the thing that is the most important to your parents, they will say as grown adults, do not lie. Thou shalt not lie. So I mean, and I believe that lying, we had some lying issues for a couple of years, and that's really hard because then you can't believe anything that your kids say, and that's rough. So if you can avoid that is very helpful. So let's talk about any questions that you guys might have.